Quiet on the set. And action.
Welcome to Media and Monuments podcast, presented by Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Media and Monuments is conversations featuring industry pros speaking on a wide range of topics of interest to media makers.
Getting a Hollywood movie made is a lesson in perseverance. Just ask WIFV member and film producer Catherine Hahn. It took her 5 decades to turn her favorite childhood book, A Wrinkle in Time, by Madeleine L'Engle, into a movie. In 2018, the story finally became a Disney picture directed by Ava DuVernay, but the road to getting there was not easy. In her new book, Becoming a Warrior, My Journey to Bring A Wrinkle in Time to the Screen, Catherine weaves together her personal life story and the twists and turns the film project took to achieve this impossible dream. Welcome, Catherine, to Media and Monuments, and congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the congratulations, and thank you for inviting me. I really look forward to having a conversation with you about one of my most favorite topics, A Wrinkle in Time.
Well, you started this idea of the book becoming a movie when you were 10 years old. And then you even wrote a letter to Mr. Walt Disney. And you became a little obsessed, would you say, with the with the book? What was that like, that you said, okay, I have to do this?
Well, I've never understood where that came from, but I read it. I could see the movie and I wanted to play Meg. And I started a letter, and the truth is I was too shy to send it. So a couple years later, he died. And I don't know why, but I sobbed, and I was so sad that Uncle Walt had died, and I had never even met the man. And I felt very guilty that I had not sent that letter. So I made a promise to myself on that day, December 15th, 1966, that I would grow up and make the movie. Dreams from a child, what can I tell you? And I stayed with it until it got done.
Yes, and there's a picture of you in the book. You're in Walt Disney's office. You had just come from interviewing about to become a producer for the film. That must have been a surreal moment for you to actually be in his office.
It was. I mean, because the office looked exactly like it did the year he died. And I write about the fact that first place I looked was where would almost sent letters land, because I wanted to know where would my letter have gone. But the most amazing moment occurred when I asked the archivist, to show me some other things. I saw his hat and everything. And then he told me that the Disney archives have all of the material from various productions. And I said to him, well, wait a minute. You mean you'll have a script of A Wrinkle in Time with my name on the cover with Jim Whittaker and the others? And he said, yes. And that's when it hit me that the movie and the materials were going to be in the Walt Disney Library. And that was something that I had dreamt of for 50 years. And I just really felt like, wow, I accomplished something here. I really set out to do something, and I made it happen. But, it was kind of strange too, bittersweet, because I got into my car. It was very hot, and I burst into tears. Because I just was this rush of feeling that came over me, that I really felt all of the loss that I had gone through. Very happy about the accomplishments, but equally aware of all the challenges that I had to overcome. And so it was a bittersweet. It was a mix. And then I write, the whole book is about, how I had to overcome all sorts of setbacks. And the number one theme for me when I read A Wrinkle in Time that recurred throughout my life, and I think many of our lives, is that darkness comes in many forms. It exists, and it can be overcome. And the book is really about how I overcame darkness, over and over and over again.
One of the things I thought was interesting was you talk about the title, Becoming a Warrior. And I thought, well, that's one of the celestial beings talks about that, becoming a warrior. But I also thought you were a warrior from the get-go, because I read that you had this meeting in Century City for a job interview in 1976, and you wore a pantsuit, which I thought women back then did not wear pantsuits. And here you show up at wearing one. I thought, do you recall doing that? To me, that says, yes, I'm going forward and this is what I'm doing.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you picked up on that. But yes, absolutely. You had to walk in there feeling strong, confident. I wasn't feeling either one of them, but I wanted to look the part. I had studied theater in college, and I wanted to go in there and play the role of a confident young woman. And the suit, I was dressed for the moment, the part. But that's funny you would pick that up.
Well, the upshot of that particular meeting was that you ended up getting a job with Norman Lear and going across the country and working for him for many years. And he had a huge impact on your career.
Yes, I was very, very fortunate. I went to work for Norman as a receptionist in his office. That was my first job. And then from there, I produced a series of events surrounding the donation of Archie and Edith Bunker's chairs to the Smithsonian, which included a meeting with the White House, the Senate, a speech he gave at Smithsonian Associates. And then from there, he was leaving day-to-day television and was looking for someone to kind of help him with all his new endeavors. And I was very, very fortunate that he asked me if I was interested in the job. I had no idea what it meant, except that I had never wanted to be in television. I had always wanted to be in the movie business, because back in the 70s, you wanted to be in the movie business, not television. And so he wanted to produce movies, and I thought, oh, wow, this is fantastic that I'll finally be able to learn everything there is to learn about producing a movie. And within 6 months, we were doing research on the religious right, a very conservative group. And one thing led to another, and Norman created a national nonprofit called People for the American Way. And I helped him create that, which necessitated a lot of travel across the country, lots of time spent in New York and elsewhere.
I thought it was great that one of the reasons why it appeared that you were such a good fit for that was due to the fact that you had already worked in Washington before. You had worked or you were interned with a senator from Alaska and some other people, and not many people have that level of experience. Of course, we're here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I have even interned on the Hill. But to have that level of experience, especially somebody who had been in California, was, I thought, fantastic and really lend itself to what you were doing in that regard, in that role.
It goes even further than the time working on the Hill. My father worked for Lyndon Johnson and started working for him in 1957. So I grew up around politics. It wasn't just, being somebody on the Hill in the 70s. I was around politicians and politics for a very long time. And I write a little bit about the fact that, I didn't realize it, but I was learning diplomacy at the age of 12, even though I resented it. I wanted to go off and be with my friends. And my mother would say, oh, somebody's coming over today, some president of some country, and they want to see an American family. And I had to go put a dress on. And I wanted to be outside playing, and it was just, I lived in very strange in two worlds, right? Like a regular kid and then being pulled into some quite extraordinary situations. So with my parents, I think that I really learned that politicians, artists, anyone that has achieved a lot or works to achieve a lot, they're just normal people, and you treat them with respect. And my experience has always been that they are willing to listen. You go in and you say, this is what we need. What do you think? And they're right there with you. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to marry my interest in the theater and all of my experience in politics when I went to work for Norman.
And when you talk about people listening, you talked to him about wanting to buy the rights for A Wrinkle in Time. And he did listen to you, which, again, not really happening for many women who are approaching an executive, but you were able to do that.
Well, that's Norman's gift, right? When Norman was at the heyday of his working, and I think even to today, he always wanted to listen to a person on the street or his top executive. He was just constantly wanting to get new information, new perspective. He was always eager to hear a compelling argument why something should be one way or not. And I got the courage to ask him to read A Wrinkle in Time. And I just so happened, this is the synchronicity of life, or serendipity. It was just, I asked him about another movie, and his response was, oh, it had a real vision to it, the same kind of vision that little book you like so much needs. And I said, oh, you mean A Wrinkle in Time? And he said, yeah, that's not for me, but I love the story. And I said, well, can I go after the rights anyway? And he said, well, you have to convince Alan Horn. And if you can do that, then yes. So a day later, Alan Horn, who was then president of Norman's company, had a copy of the book on his desk. And a month later, I got a note from Alan, and he said, I don't know how you're going to make this, but go for it. So with that, I wrote my letter to Madeleine L'Engle, and the rest is history. But really, honestly, I was very lucky.
Well, I like the fact that you said to her, call collect. Again, another piece of courage, because I would not have thought to do that. And I remember I had grandparents who are British, and they lived in England. So to get, these calls, was overseas calls. That was amazing. And then you told her, oh, call collect. And did you know, all right, I better be at my desk. I didn't leave my desk to make sure that
and I wasn't at my desk. That's what was so funny. I was down the hall. I was in Norman's office. And what just I couldn't believe is that I said call collect, but she did call collect. And someone came down the hall and said, you have a collect call from Madeleine L'Engle. Will you accept it? And I went, what? Absolutely. I'll be right there. And then I got on, and the operator said, will you accept a collect call from Madeleine L'Engle? And I said, yes. I was not prepared to even know how to speak to her because, I was so excited, and I really wanted to get her to like me, to get her to want to meet with me. So there was all of that going on in my head. And she said, okay, I'll meet with you. Come to New York. And it was like, okay. So I got off the phone, and I said, Norman, do you mind? Can I go to New York and get the rights? And he said, okay, see you. Yes, do it. And that is where I was very fortunate that I was working and had a boss who was pushing all the young people around him to reach their full potential. And I think that he was definitely doing that for me. And I was very appreciative of it.
Well, I like how you go to New York and then you go to Windows on the World, which I worked in New York for about 20 years. And Windows on the World, I was there a month before 9/11, went there numerous times, So when you said that, I was like, oh, just the memory it brought back for me, of being there. And because it was such a special place. So I thought you must have just felt like, I'm here. I'm really here talking to her.
Well, I did. And what was so funny was that, so now I know that Madeleine L'Engle has agreed to meet with me for lunch. And I asked like 10 people, where should we go? It wasn't like I knew of Windows on the World. And someone said, well, Windows on the World has a beautiful view of Manhattan. And since you're trying to convince someone to believe in your vision, it would be great to be high up so that she can kind of get a sense of who you are, just the ambience of being high up there on the Windows of the World restaurant. But the irony is that I walked in and I have a terrible fear of heights. And the maitre d' started to sit us right next to the window. And I said, oh, I have a fear of, this place is high. It was the highest building in the world, highest restaurant in the world. And I said, could we sit a little inward? And Madeleine laughed. She thought that was so funny. And so, yes, it was Windows on the World. It was an extraordinary lunch. I had no idea what it is I was supposed to do or say. It was the first time I had ever done something like this. But I think that I had a lot of belief in the book as a movie. And I had a lot of inner confidence that I loved it so much I could convince her that Norman Lear, because it would be him and his company, and I as the champion would be a good fit. And it was so wonderful because we got into the taxi on the ride uptown, and she said, let's see if we can make this work. And I was so thrilled because at lunch, I had come to find out that hundreds of people over the years had wanted the rights to A Wrinkle in Time. I'm not the only one. And she had always turned them down for one reason or another. So when she said, let's see if we can make this work, I was just really so excited, but I was trying to be so cool. But I was very, very excited. But then it took 6 months because lawyers going back and forth. And I will say there were times when Madeline would call me and she would say, this isn't working because of X. And then there would be times when I'd call her and I'd say, this isn't working because of Y. And the two of us together in our own ways were nudging the legal team to try to get the deal done. And it did. It got done.
And you did it because I did read about the fact that you go to Madeline's house, you get there, and her husband, he makes you a liverwurst and cream cheese sandwich, which is what Charles Wallace gives his mother. And I was like, wait a minute, I want to hear the part that says I think this is on page 107 where you're telling this anecdote, that you ate the sandwich, and what did it taste like? Tell me about that.
Well, I did eat the sandwich. I had never had liverwurst and cream cheese before. And, it felt like I was in a very surreal situation because the Murray home in A Wrinkle in Time is modeled after their home in Goshen, Connecticut, which Madeline and Hugh and the family call Crosswicks. And I'm sitting there in the kitchen. It looks very much like the kitchen as it's described in A Wrinkle in Time. And I'm eating this sandwich. And it was just kind of hard to stay in my body. I was so thrilled. But I kind of liked it, actually.
Right, because then you do talk about how spending time with Madeline, and you say, the more I spent time with Madeline, the more I saw there were many layers to the story.
Oh, yeah. When I read it as a child, I don't know if anybody listening ever saw the Haley Mills movie In Search of the Castaways. But it was a great adventure story of this brother and sister with the help of an older man going on this adventure to find the lost father who mysteriously disappeared. Well, I think that I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly like A Wrinkle in Time. So of course, Walt Disney's going to want to make that movie. So in my mind, the movie was this adventure story about these kids going to find their father. And as I listened to Madeline, not just that visit, but on multiple visits and many conversations with her, I began to realize that this wasn't just a simple adventure story. There was a lot going on in her life when she wrote the book. And so there's so many layers. As she was processing a lot of things that she was dealing with in her life. And one of the things she once said is she wrote A Wrinkle in Time as an affirmation of life. And I love that because I think it is. I think it's a story, an affirmation of life. And so I learned so much from her. One of the funny things is I can't remember the poem, but one time she recited this poem. And in it, there's some line about I have to unlearn I can't remember the exact words. But anyway, it's like this word was unlearn. And I thought, unlearn? I'm trying so hard to learn enough to stay in the same room with her. So, it wasn't until much later did I understand that poem. And I eventually did understand that poem. But I was so young and so happy and very determined. I was just very determined. And I tell you something else that I don't talk about a lot. I mean, I really kind of realized this when I was writing the book, but part of my confidence is that Norman had so much confidence in me. Norman expected me to succeed. So I would walk into any room, and I walked into the room feeling like I would succeed. It wasn't that I was always right. You had to listen. You had to be able to turn on a dime, and it's always a collaboration. But I think his belief in my abilities and his belief that Madeline would be interested in what I had to say mattered a great deal. And I think that was always part of any kind of conversation I had with her.
Because of that fact that he was saying, okay, go ahead and do it. And you said, all right, I guess I can do it.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing that's so funny is like he never told me what to do. He never told me how to do it. He just said, oh,
right,
you're
that
fine.
would be my
You're fine.
question. Right. How do you do this? What's step 1, 2, and 3 when you're negotiating book rights?
Exactly. And he said, you'll figure it out. You'll ask the right questions. You'll figure it out. And I think because he kept saying that, I had to figure it out. I had to ask the right questions and not give up until I got the answers that moved something forward.
That's great, though, when you have that type of person in your corner, because you not only worked for Norman, but you also did work for Francis Ford Coppola. And you look back on your arc of your career and you just go, wow, you worked for that person. But Norman does appear to be the biggest influencer on what you were.
I'm so young. Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, I was 20. Well, let's see, I guess I was 24 when I first started working in the company. But when I was working as his assistant, I was 26. And, life is a huge canvas, and I think that I was lucky that Norman was such an influence, but not to diminish the influence Madeline had, because Madeline had an equal level of influence in my life. I mean, Madeline was also someone that made me feel that I would make something happen. She believed that I would get that contract negotiated. She believed in the fact that, when screenplay after screenplay didn't work, that we would figure it out. And I think that kind of enthusiasm and hopeful thinking, I have found is key to everything. Mm-hmm. If you walk around always saying this can't be done, well, it can't be done. But if you believe that it can, it's not that you know exactly how to do it, but that you believe that it can be done, and you keep looking for those people that can help you make it happen.
Yes, I believe that that's probably what helped you, especially you did suffer a number of losses. And you, at one point, you talk about producing Wrinkle in Time became a lost dream, no chance of ever becoming a reality. But I know I can't stay curled up in my bedroom. And you just forged ahead.
Well, I think I walked away from the entertainment business at one point in my life. It was not easy being a woman in entertainment in the late 70s, early 80s, and I wanted more out of my life. I think being around Madeline and her family and being at her home in Goshen, I realized that my whole life was work. That's all it was. My life was work. And I had nothing else. And I wanted to really fully understand who I am. And there had to be more parts to me other than work. And so I went to work for the chairwoman of the Democratic Convention in 1984 and helped her mount the convention for television. And in the course of that, I met this really darling young man named Patrick O'Dell. And I ended up marrying this wonderful man. And we had 3 children. And we had this wonderful life up in the Bay Area. And then one day I got a phone call and the paramedic was on the line, and he had dropped in the lobby of his office building and died within 30 minutes. And our children were 2, 6, and 9. And I write in the book, and it's so easy for me to say now, but at the moment I remember saying to the paramedic, well, you must be wrong. People who have 2-year-olds don't die. That's all I could think, was that, well, no, this can't possibly, you have this wrong, But he unsadly convinced me that he was right. And so I think the shock of Patrick's sudden death was the hardest thing ever that I've had to deal with. And I think it was the shock, and then so sad for my 3 darling children that they have lost their father when I'm so close to my own. I mean, that was just, and I remember marrying Patrick thinking, oh my God, he's going to be such a fantastic father, that my kids were going to be so lucky. And it was really, truly the saddest time of my life.
But you forged ahead, and that's why I think the book is such a wonderful affirmation of your advice and wisdom and how to carry on. And thanks to the Weinstein Company, the book was made into a television project. So that you were the executive producer on. Didn't you feel like, okay, I accomplished that goal? Did you say, okay, that's it?
No, because it was a mini series for television. And a mini series and a film, a major motion picture are 2 different things. And when I was a kid, all I kept thinking was, I'll see this big on the big screen, big movie. And I think also the TV version, there were so many constraints. We didn't have the budget we needed. There was just so many different things. And a lot of good people tried their best to make it work. And it just wasn't the dream. I mean, I wish I knew better. To maybe if I had known more, maybe if everybody else had known more. But also in the technology hadn't really advanced that much, and so there's a lot of special effects in Wrinkle. So when it was aired, I just thought, oh my gosh, this is not my dream. I have to keep forging ahead until it's made in the way that I think it deserves to be made. And it was really my son, who was 9 years old at the time, was reading this book called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I think that's a Chamber of Secrets, or I can't remember which one. What was the first?
Right, there's a whole series of Harry Potter novels. Yes.
Well, the thing that I loved was that Ben loved reading because of this book, and so obviously I had to read the book. And I thought, oh my gosh, if people love Harry Potter so much, maybe there's an opportunity to get A Wrinkle in Time made as a big picture. Because one of the things that and in a way it goes without saying, is that it was pretty hard in the 70s and 80s and 90s to get a movie on a fantastical adventure with a young girl in the center, the protagonist. I mean, you look at the Star Wars movies and you look at even Harry Potter, it's a young boy, I mean, Hermione's in there, but it's Harry's story. And that was really difficult. But I wouldn't let that stop me from not trying. And so it was Ben's love of Harry Potter that kind of re-energized me and thought, okay, we can do this. And then there were some opportunities and I grabbed them.
One of the things about the book, there's a quote from Oprah, and she says, there is the appointed time and then there's the anointed time. And I thought that was very applicable to this situation, because suddenly everything came together and you met Ava DuVernay, you met Oprah, Reese Witherspoon, Mindy Kaling, Chris Pine. It all came together for you in the way it was meant to be.
Exactly. And, wouldn't it be Oprah that would know how to frame that, because she was absolutely correct. I had always been trying to get it made, and then it was made when it was supposed to be made and in the way it was supposed to be made. I had a vision in my head for a lot of years, but that vision is what propelled me forward. It wasn't necessarily that that's the vision that should be on the screen, and I mean, maybe there were some bits and pieces that made it in Ava's film, but Ava had, an incredible vision. And I was so excited that Disney and the executives were hugely supportive of her. That's another thing too. I remember meeting the executives at Disney And so much had changed since I was a young woman in the entertainment business. And they were looking for stories with a female protagonist like this. They were interested in this story. They wanted to work with Ava. Everything had changed for the better. And I was really thrilled. I was really thrilled. And not to diminish the role Jennifer Lee played, because one of the things that was always so difficult, as with any really great movie, is you have to have a lot of rewrites. And sometimes people would there would be one or two revisions on the script, but then they would just let it go. They didn't want to work on it anymore. If you didn't get it the second time, forget it. But with Jennifer, she had written one of the biggest box office successes of all time for Disney, at least in the animation department. And so we found out when Jennifer said to people there that A Wrinkle in Time was her favorite book when she was a child and she wanted to be considered as the screenwriter, we were just overjoyed. And I think that Jennifer's enthusiasm and commitment to the film was equally as important at a certain time in the process as then when Ava came on, and then her commitment and enthusiasm got us over the finish line.
And you did it. Fantastic.
We did it.
Right. It does. It takes a village. I did want to ask you about your mom's advice when you talk about she told me to always smile. How did that help you pull forward in your career?
That's, it's very interesting to me that several people have picked up on that. I had been to 14 different schools by the time I was 14 years old. My parents weren't in the military, but being in politics, when I was younger, we would be in Washington, D.C. when the Senate was in session and in Austin when the Senate was out of session. And then there were just many reasons why we traveled. We moved and for my dad's work. So I was always the new kid, the outsider, and I hated it. And by the time I became a freshman in high school, particularly at that age, I hated being the new kid. And I just desperately wanted to go to a new school. I just desperately wanted to do something other than being there. And my mother said, look, I understand. This is what I want you to do. I want you to give it 6 months. Give it 6 months. And when you feel badly, smile. Just smile. And let me tell you why. Because you're going to be walking by another young person who's feeling just like you are. And if you smile at them, they'll smile back and you will make them feel good. And when you make them feel good, you will feel better. And I just kind of looked at her and thought, oh my God, she's just such an idiot to say something like that. I mean, it was like, no way was I going to do that. Well, a couple of days later, I'm at school, and of course, I'm feeling terrible, and I'm walking down the hallway, and I see someone that looks equally glum, and I smile, and she smiled back, and I thought, oh, this smiling stuff, maybe it works. And so, multiple times in my life where I'm not quite sure what to do, what to say, I just think, okay, I'll smile my way through it. And I'm telling you, it works. Try it.
See, more words of wisdom from Catherine Han. Wanted to ask you, because you are speaking to media and monuments, and it's part of Women in Film and Video, wanted to ask you, how has WIFV helped you with your career?
Oh my gosh. When I first started out, I remember Women in Film in Los Angeles was kind of in its infancy, and it was so exciting. I remember the very first event I went to at the Beverly Hilton, and the room was filled with women in the entertainment business. And it was such an eye-opening experience to see that there really are so many women trying to make their way in a very tough man's world. And when I moved to Washington, D.C., and I think I was here just for a few years, and there was some event, and someone invited me to attend some gala. And I was, again, the same thing. Oh my God, so many women in this town that are working hard, either, making films or documentaries or working in the news or doing videos for government, but they're trying to tell stories with video and film. And I was just really, really happy to be part of this community. And I just love, I've participated in some of the workshops and things like that. And I have to say, it's really wonderful to kind of be the one that's encouraging others to reach their potential and to not give up. And I love it. I mean, I just think Women in Film in DC has a huge role to play in encouraging new talent and helping those that aren't so new because the business is tough, a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration. And there can be a lot of times when people just aren't nice. So when you have like a home base in Women in Film, it's really important.
Her new book, Becoming a Warrior, My Journey to Bring a Wrinkle in Time to the Screen, is now available everywhere. It's full of wisdom and advice for anyone who has a dream. Thank you, Catherine, for chatting with Media and Monuments.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Thank you for listening to Media and Monuments, a service of Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Please remember to review, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. For more information about WIFV, please visit our website at WIF as in Frank, V as in Victor.org.
That's a wrap.